In tonight's episode, we uncover 3 chilling stories from across Japan, each one rooted in places you might walk past without a second thought. But the first tale takes us not to a haunted house or a lonely mountain road, but into the dream world of an exhausted salaryman. He thought his strange visions were nothing more than the side effects of overwork, late nights, and too much coffee. Yet one dream kept repeating itself. A dream where he killed his boss in cold blood. Each time, the setting was the same. A moss-covered shrine he had never once visited in real life. The problem? That shrine exists, and it has a name locals whisper with unease: Yizumigami Shrine. He was the kind of man you've seen 100 times in Tokyo. A grey suit, a tired face, a briefcase dangling from his hand like dead weight. By day, he was just another salaryman swallowed by the endless rhythm of office towers and fluorescent lights. Wake up, rush to the train, work until midnight, collapse into bed, repeat. To the outside world, he was unremarkable. But inside, his mind had begun to unravel in dangerous ways. It started small, with trouble sleeping. The kind of restless nights where the walls feel closer than they should, where the ticking of the clock sounds like a hammer against your skull. Then came the lucid dreams. At first, they were almost a relief, an escape. In his dreams, he could walk freely through streets that shimmered with neon, climb skyscrapers with his bare hands, or drift weightless across a sky streaked with pale blue clouds. But soon the dreams turned dark. There was one vision in particular that kept returning, always the same. He would find himself standing at the base of an old stone staircase, surrounded by forest so dense the moonlight barely pierced it. At the top was a shrine. Its gate was marked by a torii, weathered and half-eaten by moss, its crimson paint peeling away like old skin. Inside that shrine, he committed an act he could never have imagined in waking life. He murdered his boss, over and over again. Each dream, the same moment, the same shrine. The same blood on his hands. At first, he brushed it off as nothing more than the product of stress. Everyone complains about their boss, he told himself. Everyone dreams about quitting or lashing out. But these dreams felt too real. He could smell the damp wood of the shrine. He could hear the crunch of gravel beneath his shoes. He could even taste the metallic tang of iron in the air, as if blood itself had soaked into the soil. The disturbing part wasn't just how vivid the dream was, it was what came after. In the mornings, he began waking up with scratches on his arms. Small at first, then deeper, as if he had clawed at something in the night. Once, he woke to find his shoes placed neatly by the door, dirt clinging to the soles, though he swore he hadn't worn them outside in days. The shrine in his dream felt familiar, as if it were calling to him, and yet he knew he had never been there. He had grown up in Osaka, moved to Tokyo for work, and never once stepped foot in the countryside where shrines like that were tucked away. But one night, over drinks, a coworker casually mentioned the name of a place that froze him in his seat: Yizumigami Shrine. Hidden deep in the mountains of Fukui Prefecture, known among locals as a place where dreams and reality bleed together. The salaryman laughed it off in front of his coworker, pretending it was nothing. But when he returned home, his heart was still racing. Because that was the name. The shrine he had seen in his dreams wasn't just a trick of the mind, it was real, and it was waiting for him. From that night forward, sleep became a prison. He tried everything: medication, blackout curtains, even staying awake for days at a time. Nothing helped. The dreams returned, pulling him back to the shrine again and again, each time more vivid, more violent. He began to wonder if this was more than exhaustion, more than stress. Perhaps he wasn't dreaming at all. Perhaps he was being summoned. And so, one rainy weekend in early spring, He made a decision that would change his life forever. He packed a small bag, left the city behind, and boarded a train bound for the mountains. He told himself it was just curiosity, just a way to put the nightmare to rest once and for all. But deep down, he knew the truth. He wasn't searching for answers. He was following a call. And Yuzumigami's shrine was waiting. When the train pulled into the countryside station, the salaryman stepped out into a world that felt strangely muted. The air was heavy with the scent of rain-soaked earth, and the mountains loomed like dark walls against the horizon. He carried his small bag and followed the narrow road that wound upward through the forest. The further he went, the quieter everything became. Even the insects seemed to fall silent, as if the woods themselves were holding their breath. At last he saw it. The torii gate from his dreams stood before him, its red paint almost entirely stripped away, leaving only streaks of dull wood beneath. Moss clung to the stone steps that climbed into the trees, and a thin mist curled around them like smoke. His chest tightened. This was the place, the exact shrine that had haunted his sleep for months. As he climbed the steps, he felt the strange sensation of déjà vu pressing in on him. Each stone looked exactly as it had in the dream. The warped handrail, the uneven steps, even the crooked lantern that leaned precariously to one side. His feet seemed to know where to go before his mind did. It was as if he were retracing steps he had already taken countless times. Reaching the top, he found the shrine itself, small, unassuming, almost forgotten. Its wooden frame was darkened with age, its roof sagging beneath the weight of damp leaves. Yet there was a gravity to it, an unshakable feeling that the structure was not abandoned at all, that something was watching from within. He stepped closer, and that's when he noticed something strange. A bowl had been placed at the entrance filled with offerings, coins, folded slips of paper, and even a few fresh flowers. Someone had been here recently. Someone still visited this place. A sudden chill ran down his spine when he spotted the wooden ima plaques hanging nearby. They swayed slightly in the breeze, etched with messages from visitors. He leaned in to read them, and his blood ran cold. One plaque bore his own handwriting. The words were crude, jagged, as if carved in a rush. But there was no mistaking it. It was his handwriting, the same slant, the same shape of letters. And the message? It was a confession. A desperate plea written in the dream, now hanging in the waking world. "Forgive me. I cannot stop. He dies every night." His throat tightened. He had never been here. He had never carved this message. And yet it was here, weathered slightly, as if it had hung for weeks. He stumbled back, heart racing. The forest seemed to close in tighter, the air suddenly thick and suffocating. It was no longer a curiosity, no longer just a dream bleeding into reality. It was something else. A thread pulling him deeper into a place where the lines no longer existed. For the first time, he wondered if coming here had been a mistake. The longer he lingered at the shrine, the more the forest seemed to bend around him. The air grew thick, damp, as if every breath carried the weight of centuries. He turned away from the ima plaque, trying to convince himself it was just coincidence, a trick of the mind. Perhaps someone else had handwriting like his. Perhaps his imagination was stretching the truth. But the deeper part of him, the part that had carried him all the way here, knew better. He knelt to steady himself and noticed something carved into the stone base of the shrine. A fresh scratch, cutting through layers of moss. His hand traced the grooves, and his stomach dropped. It was a date. Just 3 days earlier. The realization hit like a cold blade. Someone else had been here. Someone who knew this place still mattered. A soft sound broke the silence. Footsteps on gravel. He whipped his head around. A woman stood at the edge of the clearing, half hidden by the mist. Her clothes were plain, an old-fashioned kimono faded to gray. She didn't move closer, but her eyes fixed on him with quiet intensity. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice almost swallowed by the wind. He stammered, unsure how to respond. I dreamed of this place. I had to see it." Her expression hardened. "Dreams are dangerous here. They are not yours alone." Before he could question her, she turned and started down the path, her form dissolving into the fog until she was gone. He wanted to follow, to demand answers, but his legs refused to move. Instead, he found his gaze drawn back to the shrine. Something inside whispered to him, soft but insistent. As he approached, he noticed more Ema plaques swaying on the rack. Their wood was cracked, some so old the carvings were nearly erased. But when he leaned closer, his skin prickled. Each one bore a message that felt like fragments of his own mind. Dreams of blood, desires for escape, nightmares of violence repeating endlessly. Different handwriting, different names, but the same obsession scrawled across decades. He staggered back, bile rising in his throat. This wasn't just his torment. Others had dreamed it before him. Others had been drawn here, compelled to carve their confessions into the wood. And then he saw it. One plaque hanging crooked, darker than the rest, its ink fresh and wet. The words looked as though they had been written just minutes earlier. "He has arrived." A rustling came from behind him. His pulse thundered in his ears as he spun around. The clearing was empty. Only the forest stood in silence, watching. Panic clawed at him. He wanted to leave, to run down the steps and never look back, but his body felt tethered to the shrine, as though the air itself was holding him in place. The shadows lengthened. The mist thickened. And then, just as the last light of day began to vanish, he heard another voice. It was not the woman. It was deeper, colder, and it seemed to come from inside the shrine itself. "Why do you resist? You came here to finish what you began." His knees buckled, and for a moment he thought he would collapse onto the wet earth. He pressed his palms together in a desperate attempt at prayer, but the words would not form. The shrine seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat, dragging him further into its grip. And then the sound of footsteps returned, heavier this time, deliberate, as if circling him just beyond the mist. Whoever or whatever it was, he was no longer alone at Yuzumagami Shrine. The mist swirled around him like a living thing, curling low to the ground, climbing higher until the trees blurred and the world shrank to nothing but shrine and shadow. His breath came in sharp, ragged bursts, each exhale clouding before his face. The footsteps had stopped. Silence pressed against his ears, too heavy, too deliberate, as though something immense were holding its breath just beyond his vision. And then the shrine door creaked open. It was only a sliver, a dark mouth yawning wider. No one should have been inside. The structure was too small, abandoned for decades. Yet from that gap came the glow of dim candlelight flickering against the wet wood. He felt his body move forward, though his mind screamed to turn back. Step by step, the shrine pulled him closer until he stood at its threshold. Inside, the air was suffocating. The faint smoke of burned incense lingered, heavy, with a bitter undertone. Offerings cluttered the small altar. Coins, food long rotted, even small dolls with their faces half worn away. But what froze him was the centerpiece. A mirror, cracked, tarnished, yet unmistakably alive with something more than reflection. When he peered into it, his heart lurched. The man staring back was not him, not exactly. The face was his, yes, but contorted with rage, eyes hollow, lips curled into a cruel smile. In the reflection, his hands were drenched in blood. He staggered back, nearly toppling into the offerings. The reflection grinned wider, and in a voice that sounded both like his own and not at all, it whispered, "You've already done it." The world spun. He clutched his chest, gasping. A sudden thud made him whip around. The ema plaques outside were slamming against one another violently, though there was no wind. The forest seemed to scream without sound, the weight of countless dreams pressing down on him. And then he saw the woman again. She stood in the doorway, her kimono darker now, soaked as if with rain or something thicker. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed in black. "You've opened it," she said, her tone neither accusing nor kind. "The shrine remembers. It shows what you bury." "I haven't done anything," he shouted, his voice cracking, more plea than protest. She tilted her head, watching him as if studying an insect. "Not yet," she murmured, "but every night you carve the same path. Every night the shrine waits, and every night you come closer." The words struck like a blade. A surge of memory flooded him, fragments of dreams now tangled with waking life. His boss's face, the weight of a knife, the warm spray of blood against his hands. Except it didn't feel like memory. It felt like truth. The mirror pulsed again, its fractured surface alive with crimson light. His reflection reached out a hand, pressing its palm against the glass as though urging him closer. For the first time, he wasn't sure if he had dreamed of murder or if the shrine had dragged him here to finish something already done. The forest groaned around him. The shrine's timbers shuddered, and in that moment he understood. Yuzumigami was no shrine of worship. It was a door, and it had been waiting for him. The woman stepped fully into the shrine, her presence carrying the same weight as the fog outside. She moved with unsettling calm, her bare feet making no sound against the wooden floor. The salaryman backed away until his shoulders pressed against the wall, his eyes darting between her and the mirror that still pulsed with its fractured glow. "You've seen it now," she said quietly, almost with pity. "The shrine does not lie. It shows the heart of those who come here. What you dream is not fantasy. It is confession." Her words twisted in his chest like a blade. He wanted to protest, to deny it, but every night's dream flooded back too vividly. The knife, the blood, the sensation of release. He had told himself it was stress, nothing more. But the shrine insisted otherwise. "What do you mean, confession?" His voice was little more than a whisper. She tilted her head, her black eyes glinting with candlelight. "This place binds dreamers, those burdened with rage, with hatred, with things they will not say aloud. Yuzumigami takes it from their sleep, makes it real. That is why people fear this mountain. Too many have walked here after nights of dark dreams. Too many have never returned." The ema plaques outside clattered again, as though to echo her warning. He remembered the carvings, all those desperate messages etched by hands that could not stop themselves. He was not the first. He would not be the last. He shook his head violently. No, I've never harmed anyone. My boss, he's still alive. I see him every day." The woman's expression softened, but not in comfort. It was the look one gives to someone already doomed. "For now, but the shrine does not show what is. It shows what waits. Every night you walk closer to the truth you cannot avoid. Your body already follows. You've woken with dirt on your shoes, haven't you?" His stomach dropped. The scratches, the dirt, the shoes by the door. He had dismissed them as sleepwalking. But what if he had already been leaving his apartment at night, drawn here even before this day? The woman turned to the mirror. "Look again," she commanded. Against his will, his eyes flicked to it. The reflection leaned closer, its bloody grin wider, its hands pressing harder against the glass. Behind it now was his boss's face, pale and lifeless, eyes rolled back in death. The salaryman collapsed to his knees. "No! This isn't me! This isn't real!" The woman knelt beside him, her presence like cold iron. "It is both real and not real. The shrine bridges what you hide in sleep with what you fear in waking. Resist it, and it consumes you. Accept it, and you become its vessel. That is Yuzumigami's curse. Her words reframed everything. The dreams, the confessions on the plaques, even his long nights of exhaustion. He had thought he was unraveling under stress, that his mind was breaking. But what if it was the shrine itself, whispering into his life, pulling him across the boundary one night at a time? The woman stood, her voice now heavy with finality. You came because you were chosen. Now you must decide. Leave while you still can, or let the shrine finish what it began. The mirror flickered one last time, showing not his reflection, but himself standing over his boss's lifeless body, knife in hand. He shut his eyes, but the image stayed burned behind his lids. He stumbled out of the shrine, gasping for air as the mist swallowed him whole. His footsteps pounded against the stone steps, each one heavier than the last, as if the mountain itself were trying to hold him back. The woman's words echoed in his skull, circling like vultures. Leave while you still can. When he finally reached the base of the stairs, the night air felt no lighter. His hands trembled violently, his breath burning in his chest. He told himself he would never return, that he would bury the memory of this place and forget the shrine existed. But when he glanced down, his stomach lurched. His palms were smeared with dirt. Fresh, wet soil clung beneath his fingernails, the kind only found on the steps he had just fled. Yet he hadn't touched the ground. He hadn't fallen. A chill rippled through him as he looked back toward the trees. The shrine was no longer visible, swallowed in darkness, but he could feel it watching, waiting. The next morning, he arrived at work pale and shaken. His boss greeted him with the same casual cruelty as always, barking orders without so much as a glance. For a fleeting moment, the salaryman felt relief. Proof that it was all just a dream. But then his boss leaned closer, whispering something sharp and cruel in his ear. And in that instant, the salaryman's vision flickered. He saw blood, bright and hot, spraying across the office walls. When he blinked, the vision was gone. His hands, however, were not clean. They were still streaked with dirt. The story of the shrine is only the beginning. Because across Japan, places like Yuzumigami are not isolated legends. They're part of a larger web of locations where the line between life and death feels dangerously thin. And if the shrine was a doorway through dreams, then the next story takes us to a place just as ordinary, yet far more public. A place where countless travelers pass through every day, never realizing the danger that waits just one floor above them. Hotels in Japan are said to breathe with the memories of those who never checked out. Guests whisper about rooms no one wants, floors the elevator should never stop at, and hallways where silence is heavier than stone. And one such hotel has earned a reputation darker than all the rest. She wasn't the kind of traveler who believed in ghost stories. Business trips left her too tired for superstition, too drained to notice much beyond train schedules and endless meetings. By the time she arrived in Osaka, her only goal was simple: check into the hotel, shower, and sleep before tomorrow's presentation. The hotel looked ordinary enough from the outside: sleek glass windows, polished marble floors, the faint smell of disinfectant in the lobby. Clean, efficient, nothing unusual. At least at first glance. But as she stood at the front desk, signing her name in tired strokes, she noticed the way the receptionist avoided her eyes. His smile was practiced, but it slipped when he glanced at the screen showing her room assignment. His hand hovered just a moment too long before sliding the keycard across the counter. 7th floor, he muttered, quickly looking away. She frowned. Is something wrong with that floor? The man shook his head too quickly. No, just please enjoy your stay. It was late, and exhaustion dulled her curiosity. She thanked him and wheeled her suitcase toward the elevator, but a strange heaviness lingered in her chest. By the time she stepped inside, the air already felt different, thicker, somehow colder, as though the polished steel walls were holding in more than just her reflection. When the elevator doors slid open on the 7th floor, a blast of cool air washed over her. The hallway stretched long and silent, lined with identical doors and dim overhead lights that hummed faintly. Something about it felt off, though she couldn't immediately say what. The carpet seemed newer here than in the lobby, freshly replaced, yet faint stains peeked through like shadows that had resisted every attempt to be scrubbed away. Her room was at the very end of the hall. She unlocked the door, pushed it open, and stepped inside. To her relief, it looked just like any other hotel room: standard bed, desk, television, and a window overlooking the city. She dropped her bag onto the floor, peeled off her jacket, and sat on the edge of the mattress. The silence pressed in on her, no muffled voices from other guests, no footsteps in the hallway. Not even the faint hum of plumbing or the click of doors opening and shutting. It was as though she was the only person on the entire floor. She tried to shake the feeling, telling herself it was just fatigue. But as she unpacked, she noticed something strange. The Bible usually left in hotel drawers was missing, replaced by a plain slip of paper. Frowning, she unfolded it. The ink was smudged, but the words were still legible. "Do not stay in this room." Her heart skipped. She dropped the note back into the drawer, forcing a nervous laugh. Probably a prank, she told herself. Someone before her must have thought it was funny. Yet when she returned to the bed, the sense of being unwelcome gnawed at her. She pulled the curtain shut, dimmed the lights, and tried to sleep. But the room didn't feel like hers, not even for a night. It felt borrowed, fragile, like she was trespassing, where someone, or something, still lingered. And outside her door, the hallway remained utterly, impossibly silent. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the city lights faintly glowing through the curtains. Hours passed, yet sleep refused to come. The silence of the 7th floor was unnatural, oppressive. It wasn't just quiet. It was hollow, as if the building itself were holding its breath. Sometime past midnight, she heard it, a soft knock at the door. She froze. 3 slow raps, measured and deliberate. Not loud, not frantic, just enough to announce a presence. She sat upright, heart pounding, staring at the door from across the room. Her mind scrambled for explanations. A late housekeeping mistake? Another guest who had the wrong room? She waited, listening. No voice followed. No footsteps in the hall. Just silence. Summoning her nerve, she approached the peephole and pressed her eye to the glass. Nothing. The hallway was empty, stretching dimly in both directions. Her hand hovered over the lock, but she didn't dare open the door. She retreated back to the bed, trying to steady her breath. Minutes passed, then half an hour. She almost convinced herself she had imagined it, until the knock came again. This time, it was closer, not at the door but on the wall beside the bed. Her skin prickled as she pressed her palm to the wallpaper. The knock repeated, hollow and deliberate, as if coming from the room next to hers. Relief washed over her for a moment. Of course, another guest. The walls were thinner than she thought. Someone must be restless too. But when she leaned closer, she noticed something that curdled her relief into dread. The knock wasn't echoing from the other side. It was from inside the wall itself. She jerked her hand away, stumbling back from the bed. The sound stopped immediately, leaving only the hum of the light overhead. She stood frozen, staring at the wallpaper, as if expecting it to ripple. Finally, desperate for reassurance, she grabbed the phone on the bedside table and dialed the front desk. The line rang too long before the receptionist's voice answered, clipped and cautious. 7th floor? He asked, before she could even explain. Her throat tightened. Yes, I keep hearing knocking in my room, on the walls. I think someone's... Stay inside, he interrupted quickly. His voice dropped lower. Do not open the door. I'll send someone up. The line went dead before she could reply. She stared at the receiver, her pulse racing faster now. The warning replayed in her mind. Stay inside. Don't open the door. Why had he sounded so certain, so urgent? And why hadn't he asked her room number? The knocks did not return, but the silence felt heavier than ever. She sat on the bed with the phone still clutched in her hand, realizing something she hadn't dared to consider before. Whatever haunted this hotel, the staff already knew, and they were afraid of it too. She didn't sleep the rest of the night. The phone stayed on the bedside table, the receiver just an arm's reach away, but no one ever came. No knock from staff, no follow-up call, nothing. When morning finally crept through the curtains, the light felt brittle, like it had been filtered through glass that was cracked but not broken. She almost laughed at herself, chalking it all up to nerves, to travel fatigue, to imagination. Almost. At breakfast in the lobby restaurant, she spotted the receptionist who had checked her in. He smiled politely, but his eyes widened when he realized what floor she had slept on. He approached her table under the guise of clearing dishes and leaned down just close enough to whisper, "You should ask for a different room. 7th floor is unlucky." She frowned. "Unlucky how?" But the man only shook his head and retreated quickly before she could press further. Back in the elevator, she noticed something she hadn't before. The panel had no button for the 4th floor. Superstition, she recalled, because the word for 4 sounded too much like death in Japanese. Many buildings skipped it. Yet here she was, in a hotel where people whispered about the 7th instead. When the doors opened again, the hallway stretched out silent and unchanged, as though the night before had left no trace. But as she slid her keycard into the door, something new caught her eye. A white string had been tied across the handle, knotted into a small loop. She hadn't noticed it last night, and it wasn't the hotel's doing. Someone had deliberately placed it there. A warning? Or a seal? She hesitated, but the lock clicked open easily. Inside, the room looked the same, tidy, bland, waiting. But when she moved toward the desk, her suitcase caught her attention. She had left it zipped and pushed neatly against the wall. Now it sat slightly open, one of her blouses folded carefully on top, as if someone had been through it. Her throat tightened. She checked the closet, the bathroom, even under the bed. Empty. Still, the feeling of intrusion clung to her skin. That night, she couldn't bring herself to turn off the lights. She lay fully clothed on the bed, watching the ceiling, when the sound returned. Not a knock this time. A dragging noise, heavy and slow, moving across the hallway outside her door. She crept to the peephole, pressing her eye against the glass. At first, the hallway was empty. Then, something passed by. Not a person exactly, just the shadow of one. It slid across the carpet without sound, the shape blurred, as if the figure wasn't walking but floating. Her heart pounded, but she couldn't look away. The shadow stopped directly in front of her door. She held her breath, convinced it could sense her watching, and then it bent down. For the briefest instant, she saw the vague outline of a face, inches from the peephole, staring back at her with hollow, distorted features. She recoiled violently, nearly dropping to the floor. When she looked again, the hallway was empty. The phone rang sharply, making her flinch. She grabbed the receiver with trembling hands. The receptionist's voice came through, hushed and urgent. "You looked, didn't you?" he said. "You should never look." Before she could speak, the line went dead again. That night, the hotel felt more like a trap than a shelter. She locked the door, bolted it, even dragged the desk chair in front for good measure. The receptionist's words gnawed at her. Don't look. But it was too late. She had already seen the hollow face staring back. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the building made her flinch. Every gust of wind outside seemed to snake its way into the room. Hours stretched like days until, around 2 a.m, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew heavy, thick, like the pressure before a storm. The lights flickered once, twice, then dimmed but never fully went out. And then the knocking returned. This time, it wasn't polite or restrained. It shook the walls, booming from every direction at once. Ceiling, floor, closet, bathroom door. The sound surrounded her, relentless. She clamped her hands over her ears, but the vibration still shuddered through her bones. The phone rang again. She seized it desperately. "Please, you have to help me." A voice cut her off. But it wasn't the receptionist this time. It was low, distorted, layered, like several voices speaking in unison. "Why are you here?" She dropped the receiver in shock, the plastic clattering against the nightstand. The knocking ceased instantly, replaced by an eerie quiet. She barely had time to breathe before the television snapped on by itself. Static hissed across the screen, and amid the snow of broken signals, shapes writhed like shadows, trying to form into something human. She backed toward the window, panic clawing up her throat. The static shifted. A face emerged, pale and warped, features stretched too wide. Its mouth opened, but instead of words, the room's lights went black. Total darkness. Her chest tightened. She fumbled for her phone, but before she could unlock it, she felt it, a presence standing directly behind her, close enough to hear the faint rattle of breath that wasn't hers. She turned slowly, heart hammering against her ribs. For a fraction of a second, she saw it. A figure crouched in the corner of the room, limbs too long, face hidden in shadow. The smell of damp earth clung to the air, sharp and suffocating. And then it moved. Not with a step, but with a sudden lurch, as if pulled forward by invisible strings. In an instant, it was at the foot of her bed, head tilting in jagged, unnatural angles. She stumbled backward until her spine hit the window. The figure raised its arm, fingers curling like claws, and pointed directly at her. In the silence that followed, she heard it speak. Not aloud, but inside her skull, a whispering chorus that chilled her marrow. "You're already in the room." The words didn't make sense at first, but as she stood frozen, her gaze flicked to the closet door. It was cracked open now, though she swore she had checked it earlier. And from the darkness within, another hand was slowly reaching out. The hand creeping from the closet froze in midair, stiff and pale, its fingers curling inward like dried branches. Her breath caught in her throat as the temperature of the room plummeted. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body betrayed her, locked in place as though the very air around her had hardened into stone. And then, without warning, the lights blinked back on. The figure at the foot of the bed was gone. The closet door now stood wide open, revealing nothing but her neatly hung clothes. The only sign anything had been there at all was the smell. An overpowering stench of mildew, iron, and damp soil that made her stomach twist. The phone rang again. This time, she didn't hesitate. She grabbed it with trembling hands, half expecting to hear the distorted voice again. But it was the receptionist, his tone urgent, no longer trying to disguise the fear in his voice. "You need to listen to me," he said, rapid, and hushed. "That room, it isn't just unlucky. Guests have died there, some in their sleep, some worse. That's why we don't use it, but..." He hesitated. "Sometimes it calls people back." Her skin crawled. "Back? What are you talking about?" He lowered his voice further, as if afraid someone might overhear. "You've already seen it, haven't you?" Through the peephole. Her silence was answer enough. The man let out a shaky breath. "That's how it begins. Once you look, it knows you. It can step inside. That's why we tie the strings on the doors, to keep it out. But sometimes the seal doesn't hold. That's when..." His words faltered, but she didn't need him to finish. Her mind flashed back to the white string tied across her door handle earlier. Not a prank, not a decoration, a seal. Someone had been trying to protect her, or at least keep whatever lingered on the 7th floor from stepping inside. Her voice quivered. "What happens if it gets in?" The receptionist didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his words were barely audible. "Then it's already too late." The line went dead. She stood in the silence, clutching the receiver, her heart thundering. Everything began to click into place. The knocks on the walls, the shadow in the hallway, the warning note in the drawer. She hadn't been imagining things. The staff knew, the guests before her knew. Even the building itself seemed to carry the weight of it. And yet, the strangest realization came as she looked around the room. Nothing appeared different. The bed was neatly made, her suitcase still half open, the curtains gently swaying with the city breeze. Normal. Utterly ordinary. But she couldn't shake the feeling that the receptionist had been wrong about one thing. It wasn't that the presence had stepped inside her room, it was that she had stepped into its... The 7th floor wasn't just unlucky. It wasn't haunted in the way old stories described. The entire floor was the room. And once you crossed the threshold, you belonged to it. She didn't wait to hear more. She snatched her bag, left it half-zipped, and bolted for the door. The hallway stretched unnaturally long as she sprinted toward the elevator, every light above her flickering in sequence as though something followed close behind. She jammed the call button with trembling hands until the doors slid open, and she dove inside, frantically pressing the button for the lobby. The elevator shuddered, the floor beneath her vibrating, like it might give way. The numbers above the door ticked downward. 6, 5, then paused. The car jolted violently. Her breath hitched as the screen above flickered and shifted to a number that didn't exist. 4. Her heart slammed against her ribs. The button for the 4th floor wasn't there. It never had been. And yet the elevator doors began to slide open. Beyond them stretched a hallway, almost identical to the 7th floor. Same carpet, same humming lights, same suffocating silence. Except this hallway was lined with doors that were all slightly ajar, every crack spilling shadows too black to belong to any room. She jabbed the close button desperately, but the doors didn't move. For a moment, she thought she heard it again, the slow, deliberate knock echoing from every door at once. And then, just before the lights inside the elevator cut out, she realized the truth with sickening clarity. She had never left the 7th floor at all. The strange thing about Japanese horror is how it shifts shape. One moment it lurks in forgotten shrines, the next it hides inside hotel walls. But sometimes, the most unsettling stories don't come from remote mountains or cursed buildings at all. They come from the places we trust most. Our own homes, our own families. Because what could be more terrifying than realizing the person who raised you, the one who held your hand every morning, might not have been who you thought they were at all? Our final story tonight is quieter, stranger, and far more intimate. It's about a child, a mother, and the unsettling possibility that sometimes the people we love are not the ones we should trust. He was only 6 years old when it began. A shy, quiet boy who spent most mornings clutching his mother's hand as she walked him to the neighborhood daycare. His memories of those days were vivid, sharper than they should have been for someone so young, the way the gravel crunched under his little shoes, the faint smell of miso soup drifting from the kitchens of nearby homes, and his mother, always dressed the same way in those mornings. A long coat, her dark hair pinned back, and her face painted like a clown. At the time, it didn't strike him as strange. Children accept the world as it's given to them, and for him, a mother in clown makeup was simply what mornings looked like. Her white face paint gleamed in the early light, her lips drawn in an exaggerated red smile, her cheeks dusted with perfect pink circles. She never explained why. She never said a word about it. She just smiled, held his hand tightly, and walked him to the door of the daycare, leaving him with a kiss on the forehead before vanishing back down the street. The daycare staff never commented. Not once. They greeted him warmly, asked how he was doing, patted his head, and moved on. He thought nothing of it until years later. What he remembered most was the silence. On those walks, his mother never spoke. She hummed softly, tunelessly, like someone trying to remember a melody they'd forgotten. And she never let go of his hand, not even when he tried to tug free to chase a cat or pick up a shiny rock. Her grip was always firm, her smile always painted. At the daycare, he often turned back to wave before entering. She would still be standing there, watching him, unmoving. Sometimes he thought her smile looked wider than it had before. Sometimes he thought it looked sad. Then, as children do, he grew older, and the memory blurred. By the time he was a teenager, he barely thought of those strange mornings at all. Until one night, at dinner, a conversation dredged it back up. His aunt was reminiscing about his childhood, laughing about how much trouble he used to cause for the daycare staff. He smiled politely, embarrassed, and then mentioned something offhand, how his mother used to wear clown makeup when she walked him there. The room fell silent. His aunt blinked in confusion, then glanced at his mother. She looked just as baffled. "What are you talking about?" she asked. Heat rose in his chest. "You used to walk me there every morning, with makeup on, like a clown. I remember." His mother shook her head slowly. "I never did that. I wasn't even home most mornings. I left for work before dawn. It was your father who usually dropped you off." The boy, no longer a boy now, but nearly grown, sat frozen. His mother's words sliced through him with chilling precision. Because if she hadn't walked him to daycare every morning, then who had? And why had they worn her face? The revelation didn't leave him right away. It stuck like a splinter in the back of his mind. That night, he lay in bed, replaying the mornings he thought he remembered so clearly. The firm grip of her hand, the crunch of gravel, the painted smile glowing in the pale dawn light. He had never doubted those memories, never questioned them, until his mother's denial. Maybe she had simply forgotten? Adults forgot things all the time, but the more he thought about it, the more impossible that seemed. How could someone forget putting on a full face of makeup every morning for years? How could she forget walking her son to daycare nearly every day of his early childhood? The next morning, he decided to ask his father. Over breakfast, he brought it up casually, pretending he was only curious. "Dad, do you remember when Mom used to walk me to daycare with the clown makeup?" His father's spoon clattered against the bowl. He looked up slowly, brow furrowed. "Your mother never did that. I was the one who took you most mornings." The boy felt his stomach twist. He pressed on, desperate. "But I remember her hand. I remember her face. She wore makeup. Everyone saw her." His father's eyes darkened. "That's enough." His tone was sharper than usual, cutting off the conversation like a blade. At school, he carried the unease with him. During recess, he asked one of his old friends from daycare, someone who had been there in those early years, "Do you remember my mom? The clown makeup she wore?" The friend gave him a blank look. "Your mom? I don't think she ever came. I remember your dad. He picked you up a lot, sometimes late. But your mum? No." The boy laughed awkwardly, but his skin prickled cold. Were his memories wrong? Or was everyone else pretending not to remember? That night, he rummaged through an old box of photographs, hoping for proof. Most were blurry snapshots from daycare events, holiday parties, outdoor games. He flipped through them one by one, his heart pounding faster each time. His mother was never in them, not once. But then, buried deep in the stack, he found one that made his breath stop. A group photo taken outside the daycare gate. He was in the front, smiling shyly. Behind him stood several parents. His father was there, so were other familiar faces, but just over his shoulder at the far edge of the photo was a figure, a tall woman, hair pinned back. White makeup, wide red smile. The photo was faded, almost blurred, but she was there, and she wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking at him. His hands shook as he stuffed the photo back into the box. For the first time, he realized something he had never considered before. If his mother hadn't walked him to daycare, then whoever it was had been someone or something else, and they had been close enough to touch him every morning. The photo should have been the end of it, proof that his memories weren't false, that he hadn't simply invented the clown-painted mornings. But instead of comfort, the discovery only deepened the unease. Because now the question wasn't if it happened, but what exactly had happened and why no one else remembered. In the days that followed, little things began to stir the memories more sharply. He started waking up earlier than usual, often just before dawn. Through his bedroom window, the neighborhood looked the way it had when he was a child. Dim, hushed, faint mist curling between houses. And sometimes, for the briefest second, he swore he saw her. A figure standing at the end of the street, coat drawn tight, pale face gleaming faintly in the half-light, always watching, always gone when he blinked. He kept it to himself until one evening, when his aunt came over again. They were washing dishes together when he worked up the courage to ask, "Do you remember anyone strange around the daycare? A woman, maybe, who wore makeup?" Her hands stilled in the water. For a moment she didn't look at him. "What makes you ask that?" she said quietly. His chest tightened. "Because I remember her. I found a photo. She was there, Auntie. I know she was." The woman's face went pale. She dried her hands quickly and shook her head. "You shouldn't dig into that. Some things are better left forgotten." It wasn't just the words, it was the way she said them, like someone warning a child not to touch fire. That night, he pulled the photo from its hiding place again. He stared at the woman in the corner, her painted grin, the tilt of her head. He noticed something he hadn't before, her hand. It wasn't just resting at her side. It was reaching forward, fingers curled slightly, as if they had been hovering just behind his shoulder the whole time. Sleep didn't come. He'd tossed, turned, and when he finally drifted off, the dreams came. In the dream, he was small again, his hand wrapped in hers, the crunch of gravel loud beneath their steps. He tried to look up at her, but her painted smile never changed. He tugged, trying to free his hand, but her grip tightened until it hurt. She leaned down, her red mouth stretching too wide, and whispered something he couldn't understand. He woke drenched in sweat, the sound of humming still in his ears. The same tuneless hum he had heard as a child, the one he had forgotten until now. The next morning, he decided to ask someone from the daycare directly. The building was still there, though under new management. He visited on the pretense of dropping off forms for his cousin. An older staff member, one who had been there when he was a child, recognized him and smiled warmly. They exchanged pleasantries before he finally asked, "Do you remember my mother walking me here? In makeup?" Her smile faltered instantly. Her eyes flicked to the side, then back to him. She lowered her voice. "We don't talk about her." The words sent a chill down his spine. "Her? Who was she?" The woman shook her head firmly. "You should be careful. Things that look like family aren't always family." He left the daycare with his mind spinning, the weight of her words gnawing at him. If she wasn't his mother, then who had she been, and why had she chosen him? That night, as he lay awake, he thought he heard humming again. Only this time, it wasn't in a dream. It was coming from just outside his bedroom door. The humming grew louder, low and steady, seeping through the thin crack beneath his bedroom door. He sat up in bed, heart thundering, straining to listen. It wasn't a melody exactly, just the same tuneless rise and fall he remembered from childhood. For a moment, he thought it had to be his imagination, a sound pulled from the depths of memory. But then came the footsteps, soft, deliberate, padding slowly across the hallway outside. He held his breath. His parents were asleep, their room on the other side of the house. No one should be standing outside his door. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Gathering what little courage he had, he slipped from the bed and crept closer, pressing his ear against the wood. On the other side, he could hear breathing, shallow, slow, almost waiting. His hand hovered over the handle, shaking. Then, with a sudden burst of defiance, he yanked the door open. The hallway was empty, but the smell hit him immediately. Powder and grease paint, faint but unmistakable. His stomach churned. Slowly, his gaze lowered to the floor. There, clear against the wooden boards, was a single white footprint, bare, smeared with something chalky. He stumbled back, slamming the door shut, his chest tightening with panic. He grabbed his phone, intending to call someone, anyone, but the screen flickered. For an instant, the reflection staring back at him was not his own. White skin, red mouth, painted cheeks. He dropped the phone, and the humming started again. This time, it was inside the room. He spun around, searching the corners, but the space looked empty. His suitcase, his desk, the chair in the corner, all still, all ordinary. Yet the sound circled him, as if coming from everywhere at once. He clapped his hands over his ears, but it pressed straight through. And then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw it. In the mirror above his dresser, a figure was standing. Tall, familiar. His mother's shape, her posture, her coat. But the face wasn't hers, it was the clown, grinning impossibly wide, eyes dark and hollow beneath smears of white paint. She was holding his hand, not in the mirror, on his skin. He looked down, in horror. His right hand was outstretched, though he hadn't moved it, and he could feel the cold press of fingers curling tightly around his own. He tried to scream, but no sound left his throat. His knees buckled as the grip tightened, bone cold and unyielding. In the mirror, the clown mother leaned down, her painted lips close to his ear. "You remember me," she whispered. The words echoed inside his skull, leaving him dizzy and sick. He tore his hand free and stumbled backward, crashing into the bed. The mirror cracked loudly, splintering her face into jagged fragments, yet her reflection remained intact, still smiling, still watching. And in that moment, the truth clawed its way through him. This wasn't just memory. She hadn't been a dream or a childish misperception. She was real, and she had never stopped following him. The mirror continued to shimmer with fractured reflections, each shard catching the dim light and bending it into impossible angles. He stared at it, chest heaving, while the painted smile lingered on the other side as though nothing had cracked at all. His whole body shook, the chill of her hand still embedded deep in his skin like frostbite that wouldn't fade. And then, through the splinters of glass, she spoke again. Her voice wasn't loud, it was low, hushed, almost maternal. "I only wanted to take care of you." The words hit him like a hammer. His childhood memories, her hand gripping his, her silent walks to daycare, the way she hummed without melody, suddenly twisted into something new. They hadn't been ordinary moments. They had been something else entirely. He whispered, barely audible, "Who are you?" The reflection tilted its head. "You called me, Mother. You needed me. And so I came." His stomach knotted. All those mornings he thought his real mother had been there, guiding him to daycare with painted lips and cold hands. It had never been her. His mother had been gone, working before dawn, while this presence had taken her place. She hadn't stolen his memories. She had made them. The door creaked suddenly, and his aunt appeared, drawn by the sound of glass breaking. She froze when she saw the mirror, her face draining of color. "You saw her," she whispered, her voice trembling. He turned on her, desperate. "You knew? You knew she was real?" His aunt's eyes flicked to the cracked reflection. "Not real. Not human. Something that wears faces. We don't say her name." He staggered back, his heart thundering. "Then why me? Why was she with me?" His aunt's lips pressed into a thin line. "Because children don't question what they're given. You needed a mother in the morning, so she filled the gap. She clings to the role until the child sees through it. That's when..." She trailed off, her eyes shifting to the mirror. He followed her gaze, dread spreading through him. The clown mother was still there, watching, but now her reflection was different. No longer frozen, no longer smiling. Her lips were moving, whispering something only he could hear. "You're not done with me." He stumbled backward, but his aunt grabbed his arm firmly. Her face was pale, determined. "You have to understand, she isn't memory. She's presence. Once she touches you, she leaves something behind. That's why you remember so clearly when no one else does. She isn't gone. Not ever." Her words reframed everything. The notes of humming in his dreams, the figure at the end of the street, the smell of grease paint lingering where no one should have been. He had thought they were fragments of a forgotten childhood, tricks of the mind. But they weren't. They were proof that the clown mother had never left him. And as he stared into the broken mirror, every shard reflecting her painted grin, the most chilling truth of all settled in his chest. She hadn't come back. She had been waiting the whole time. That night, he couldn't bring himself to sleep. Every creak of the house, every brush of wind against the window felt like her humming, circling closer. He smashed the broken mirror, stuffed the shards into a bag, and carried them outside, desperate to destroy the last trace of her. But when he dumped the glass into the trash, his breath caught. Each fragment still held her reflection. Not his own, not the sky. Just her painted grin staring back, multiplied dozens of times. He staggered, back in horror, and that's when he noticed it. His hand, the one she had held in the bedroom, was still cold, still pale. Beneath the skin, faint lines of white powder clung stubbornly, as though pressed into his very flesh. From inside the house, his phone began to ring. He rushed back in, snatching it up, praying for his aunt, for anyone to tell him what to do. On the other end, silence. Then a low, familiar humming. The same tune from his childhood. And finally, a whisper, soft and close, as though her lips were pressed against his ear. "Are you ready for school?" The line went dead, leaving him frozen in the dark. And for the first time, he realized he would never truly know if his real mother had ever been the one who walked him to daycare at all. I hope you enjoyed these stories. If you liked them and want to listen to more, feel free to subscribe and put on your notifications. I upload almost every day. Wish you all the best.